Staff Sergeant Claire Donovan had seen enough combat to know when something was wrong. She stood in the observation tower on the north perimeter of Fort Liberty, her rifle resting against the sandbags, her eyes scanning the tree line 200 yards out. The air was thick and humid, the kind of Carolina heat that clung to your skin and made everything feel slower than it should. But Claire's instincts were anything but slow. She'd been a Marine sniper for 8 years. 2 tours in Afghanistan, 1 in Iraq. She had 43 confirmed kills, all of them clean, all of them necessary. She didn't brag about it. She didn't need to. Her record spoke for itself, or at least it used to. These days, the only thing people seemed to remember about Claire Donovan was that she was a woman in a job most men still believed she had no business doing. "Donovan, you seeing anything out there, or are you just daydreaming again?" The voice crackled through her radio. It belonged to Lieutenant Marcus Halford, the new operations officer who'd been assigned to the base 3 months ago. He was young, cocky, and had made it clear from day one that he didn't think women belonged in combat roles. Claire pressed the button on her radio, keeping her voice calm. "Negative, sir. Perimeter's clear. Good, keep it that way. And stay sharp. I know you've been out of the field for a while." She clenched her jaw but didn't respond. Out of the field for a while. That was his favorite line. He said it in briefings. He said it in front of other soldiers. He said it like it was a fact, like she'd been sitting behind a desk pushing papers instead of doing her job. The truth was, Claire had been sidelined. Not officially, not on paper, but ever since Halford arrived, she'd been assigned to perimeter duty, tower watch, and training exercises while the male snipers got sent on every real mission that came through. She'd filed a complaint. It went nowhere. She'd requested a transfer, denied, and when she tried to talk to Halford directly, he'd smiled at her like she was a child throwing a tantrum and told her to be patient. But patience wasn't going to change anything. Claire knew that. She'd seen how this worked. Men like Halford didn't respect you until you forced them to, and she was running out of ways to do that. It was nearly sunset when Claire saw the first vehicle, a white van, moving slowly along the access road that ran parallel to the base's eastern fence. It wasn't unusual to see civilian traffic out there. The road connected 2 small towns and was used by farmers and delivery trucks all the time. But something about this van made her pause. It was moving too slowly, and it didn't belong to any of the usual drivers she'd seen over the past few weeks. Claire raised her binoculars and focused on the van. The windows were tinted and she couldn't see inside. The license plate was covered in mud, unreadable. She keyed her radio. "Tower 3 to command. I've got a white van on the eastern access road." Plates obscured. Driving slow, requesting permission to investigate. There was a pause. Then Halford's voice came through, bored and dismissive. "Negative, Donovan. Probably just a local. Don't waste time on it." "Sir, the van doesn't match any regular traffic patterns." "I said negative, Staff Sergeant. Eyes on the perimeter. That's your job. Let the MPs handle civilian vehicles." Claire's fingers tightened on the binoculars. She wanted to argue. She wanted to tell him that 8 years of experience had taught her to trust her gut, and her gut was screaming that something was wrong. But she didn't, because arguing with Halford never worked. It only gave him more ammunition to use against her. So she stayed quiet and watched the van disappear around the bend. 20 minutes later, the van came back. This time, it wasn't alone. Claire's pulse quickened as she saw 2 more vehicles, both dark SUVs, following close behind the van. They turned off the access road and onto a dirt path that led toward the base's auxiliary gate, a secondary entrance used mostly for deliveries and maintenance crews. Her instincts were screaming now. She grabbed her radio. "Tower 3 to command. I've got 3 vehicles approaching the auxiliary gate. No scheduled deliveries on the log. Requesting immediate backup." Halford's voice came back sharp and annoyed. "Donovan, what did I just tell you? Stop looking for problems that aren't there." "Sir, this isn't normal." "Enough. Stand down." "That's an order." Claire stared at the radio in disbelief. "Stand down." He was telling her to ignore a potential threat, to turn her back on 3 unidentified vehicles heading straight toward a base entrance. She looked through her scope. The van had stopped near the gate. The back doors opened, and then she saw them. Men, 6 of them. All dressed in black tactical gear, all carrying rifles. Claire's breath caught in her throat. This wasn't a delivery. This wasn't a mistake, this was an attack. She keyed her radio again, her voice urgent. Command, we have armed hostiles at the auxiliary gate. I repeat, armed hostiles. This is not a drill. Halford's voice exploded through the speaker. Donovan, I don't know what game you're playing, but you need to stand down right now. That's a direct order. Do not engage. Claire's hands were shaking. She looked through her scope again. The men were moving toward the gate. One of them was placing something against the lock. An explosive charge. They were going to blow the gate, and once they were inside, they'd have a clear path to the barracks, to the armory, to hundreds of unarmed soldiers. Claire's mind raced. She had a shot. A clear shot. She could take down the man with the explosive before he set it off. But Halford had ordered her to stand down. If she disobeyed, she'd be court-martialed. Her career would be over. Everything she'd worked for, everything she'd sacrificed would be gone. But if she obeyed, people would die. Claire closed her eyes. Then she opened them, and she took the shot. The rifle kicked against Claire's shoulder. The sound cracked through the humid air like thunder. Through her scope, she saw the man with the explosive device drop instantly. Clean headshot. 210 yards. The charge fell from his hands and hit the dirt unexploded. For one frozen moment, everything stopped. Then chaos erupted. The other 5 men scattered, diving for cover behind the vehicles. Shouts echoed across the open ground. Claire could see them scrambling, trying to figure out where the shot had come from. She was already chambering her next round. Her radio exploded with Halford's voice, furious and screaming. Donovan! What the hell did you just do? I gave you a direct order to stand down. Claire didn't answer. She didn't have time. One of the men had broken from cover and was running toward the gate with another device. Claire tracked him smoothly, leading his movement by half a second, and squeezed the trigger. Second shot, second kill. The man crumpled mid-stride. Now the remaining 4 knew exactly where she was. She saw muzzle flashes as they opened fire on her tower. Bullets slammed into the sandbags and metal frame around her. The sharp crack of incoming rounds filled the air. Claire dropped below the wall, her heart hammering. Tower 3 taking fire. She shouted into the radio. I need backup at the auxiliary gate now. Multiple armed hostiles attempting breach. There was a pause. Then a different voice came through, calmer, older. It was Major Reeves, the base commander. All units, this is command. Code red. Armed intrusion at auxiliary gate. QRF deploy immediately. Tower 3, maintain position and provide overwatch. Negative. Halford's voice cut in. Sir, this is a false alarm. Donovan fired without authorization. She's seeing things that aren't. Lieutenant, shut up and pull the security footage. Tower 3, do you have visual confirmation of hostiles? Claire raised her head just enough to look through her scope. The 4 remaining men had regrouped. 2 were laying down suppressive fire on her tower, while the other 2 moved toward the gate with a 3rd explosive device. Affirmative. Sir? Claire said, her voice steady despite the bullets whining past her position. 4 Tango still active. They're trying to breach. Engage at will, Staff Sergeant. Help is on the way. Claire didn't hesitate. She rose, sighted, and fired. 3rd shot. One of the men shooting at her tower spun and fell. 4th shot. The 2nd shooter dropped. That left 2. Both had reached the gate and were working frantically to place the charge. Claire adjusted her aim, compensating for the slight crosswind. Her hands were rock steady, her breathing slow and controlled. This was what she was trained for. This was what she was born for. She fired. The 5th man fell. The last one standing froze. He looked around wildly, realizing he was alone. Then he turned and ran for the van. Claire tracked him. She could have taken the shot. Easy. But something made her hesitate. She wanted him alive. Wanted answers. Wanted to know who sent them and why. Through her scope, she watched him dive into the driver's seat. The van's engine roared to life. Then she adjusted her aim and put a round through the engine block. The van lurched forward 10 feet and died. The man kicked open the door and stumbled out. Hands raised. Seconds later, the quick reaction force arrived. 8 armed Marines in tactical gear, weapons raised, shouting commands. The last attacker dropped to his knees and surrendered. Claire lowered her rifle. Her hands were shaking now, not from fear, from adrenaline, from the weight of what she'd just done. She'd disobeyed a direct order. She'd fired without authorization, and she'd just saved hundreds of lives. 10 minutes later, Claire was escorted down from the tower by 2 MPs. They weren't rough. They weren't unkind. But they weren't friendly either. She knew what this meant. She was being placed under arrest. The base was on full lockdown. Soldiers were running everywhere, securing the perimeter, checking for additional threats. Sirens wailed in the distance. Helicopters circled overhead. Claire walked through it all in silence, her rifle confiscated, her hands empty. She was taken to the security office and told to wait in a small holding room. No handcuffs. No charges read. Not yet, but she knew they were coming. An hour passed. Then the door opened. Lieutenant Halford stepped inside. His face was red, his jaw tight. He looked at her with something between rage and disgust. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" he said quietly. Claire met his eyes. "I stopped an attack. You disobeyed a direct order. You fired on unidentified individuals without authorization. You could have started an international incident. You could have killed innocent civilians. They weren't civilians. They were armed combatants attempting to breach a military installation. You didn't know that when you fired." "Yes, I did." Halford slammed his hand on the table. "You think you're special, don't you? You think because you've been in combat? Because you have some medals on your chest that the rules don't apply to you?" Claire said nothing. "I've already spoken to the JAG office," Halford continued. "You're going to be court-martialed. Insubordination, reckless endangerment, possibly manslaughter depending on how the investigation shakes out. Your career is over, Donovan. And honestly, you deserve it." He turned and walked toward the door. Then he paused and looked back at her. "You should have trusted me," he said. "You should have stood down." The door closed behind him. Claire sat alone in the silence. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She didn't regret what she'd done, because she knew the truth. If she had stood down, people would be dead right now, and no court-martial in the world could change that. 2 hours later, the door opened again. This time it was Major Reeves. He was in his 50s, a career Marine with gray hair and a face carved from stone. He'd been base commander for 3 years, and Claire had always respected him. He pulled out a chair and sat down across from her. For a long moment, he didn't speak. He just looked at her. Then he said, "We pulled the footage." Claire's pulse quickened. "All of it," Reeves continued. "The perimeter cameras, the gate cameras, the drone surveillance we had running over the eastern sector." He leaned forward. "You were right about everything. Those men were part of a domestic terror cell. They'd been planning this attack for 6 months. They had enough explosives in that van to level half the barracks. If they'd made it inside..." He trailed off. Claire felt something loosen in her chest. "The man you captured is talking," Reeves said. "He's giving us names, locations. We've already started making arrests. The FBI is calling this one of the biggest domestic terror plots they've intercepted in a decade." He paused. "You saved a lot of lives today, Staff Sergeant." Claire's throat was tight. She didn't trust herself to speak. Reeves stood up. "Lieutenant Halford has been relieved of duty pending an investigation into his handling of the incident. The court-martial recommendation has been withdrawn. You're being reinstated to full active status immediately." He looked down at her. "You did good, Donovan. Real good." Then he left. Claire sat there alone, staring at the table. She'd been vindicated, cleared, reinstated, but it didn't feel like victory. Not yet, because she knew the hardest part was still coming. The next 72 hours were a blur. Claire was debriefed 6 times by 6 different agencies: the FBI, Homeland Security, the Naval Criminal Investigative Service, the base's own intelligence division. Each session lasted hours. Each one asked the same questions in slightly different ways. What did you see? When did you see it? Why did you fire? Why did you disobey the order to stand down? Claire answered every question the same way. Calmly, clearly, honestly, she told them about the van, about her training, about her instincts, about the armed men and the explosives and the choice she had to make in that split second when everything hung in the balance. And each time, they nodded and wrote notes and thanked her for her cooperation. But she could see it in their eyes. Some of them thought she was a hero. Others thought she'd gotten lucky, and a few, the ones who asked their questions with just a little too much edge, thought she was a problem that needed to be managed. Claire knew how this worked. She'd seen it happen to other soldiers who'd made hard choices in impossible situations. The military didn't like loose cannons. It didn't like people who broke the chain of command, even when breaking it saved lives. So she waited, and she wondered which version of her story would win out. On the fourth day, she was called to Major Reeves's office. When she walked in, she found him standing by the window, hands clasped behind his back, looking out at the base. The morning sun cast long shadows across the parade ground. "Sit down, Claire," he said quietly. She sat. Reeves turned to face her. His expression was unreadable. "The investigation is complete," he said. "All agencies have submitted their reports. The suspect you captured has provided extensive intelligence. We've made 14 arrests so far, and we expect more in the coming weeks. This cell was larger and better organized than we initially thought." He paused. "Without your intervention, they would have succeeded. Casualty estimates put the death toll somewhere between 80 and 150 personnel, maybe more." Claire felt the weight of those numbers settle over her. 150 people, sons and daughters, husbands and wives, mothers and fathers, all of them alive because she'd refused to stand down. Reeves sat down at his desk. "You're being recommended for the Navy Cross," he said. Claire's breath caught. The Navy Cross. The second highest military decoration for valor. Only the Medal of Honor ranked above it. "Sir, Reeves held up a hand. "Let me finish. You're being recommended. But there's a problem." Of course there was. Lieutenant Halford has filed a formal complaint. He's claiming that your actions were reckless and insubordinate, that you endangered lives by firing without proper authorization, that you violated the rules of engagement and the chain of command. Claire's jaw tightened. "He's also claiming," Reeves continued, "that your judgment was impaired by personal bias against him, that you fired to prove a point not because there was an actual threat." "That's a lie. I know it is. The evidence backs you up completely. But Halford's father is a 3-star general at the Pentagon, and he's making noise, calling in favors, pushing for a full inquiry." Claire felt something cold settle in her stomach. "So what does that mean?" she asked. Reeves sighed. "It means this is going to get political. The Marine Corps doesn't want to look like it's punishing a hero, but it also doesn't want to look like it's endorsing insubordination, so they're going to split the difference." "How?" "You'll get the Navy Cross. There'll be a ceremony. Press coverage. You'll be held up as an example of courage and quick thinking." He paused. "And then you'll be quietly transferred, probably to a training command, somewhere away from combat operations, somewhere you can't cause any more trouble." Claire stared at him. "They're burying me." "They're protecting you," Reeves said, "and protecting themselves. This is how it works, Claire. You did the right thing. You saved lives, but you also broke the rules, and the military runs on rules." Claire stood up. "With all due respect, sir, that's bullshit." Reeves didn't flinch. "Maybe it is," he said, "but it's the reality. You can fight it if you want. You can refuse the transfer. You can make noise. But I promise you, if you do, they'll find a way to make your life hell. They'll drag this out for years. They'll question every decision you've ever made. And in the end, you'll lose anyway." He leaned forward. "Take the medal, Claire. Take the transfer. Keep your head down for a year or two. Then maybe, you can get back to doing what you do best." Claire looked at him for a long moment. Then she turned and walked out. That night, Claire sat alone in her quarters staring at the wall. She thought about the last 8 years, about everything she'd sacrificed to get here, about the people who'd told her she didn't belong, about the men who'd laughed at her in training, about the officers who'd underestimated her, about the missions she'd completed and the lives she'd saved, and she thought about what came next. She could do what Reeves said. Take the medal. Take the transfer. Fade into the background and hope that someday someone would give her another chance, or she could fight. She picked up her phone. There was a contact she'd been avoiding for weeks, a reporter from the Washington Post who'd reached out after hearing about the attack. Claire had ignored the messages. But now, she opened the message thread and started typing. "I'm ready to talk." She hit send before she could second-guess herself. 3 minutes later, her phone rang. The interview was scheduled for the following week. Claire didn't tell anyone. Not Reeves, not her friends, not her family. She knew what she was doing was dangerous. The military hated leaks. It hated soldiers who went to the press. Even if she was telling the truth, especially. If she was telling the truth, she'd be painting a target on her back, but she was done being quiet. She was done being managed. She was done watching men like Halford fail upward while people like her got shuffled aside. The reporter's name was Sarah Chen. She was in her 40s, sharp-eyed and serious. They met in a coffee shop 2 towns over, far enough from the base that Claire wouldn't be recognized. Sarah set a recorder on the table between them. "Tell me everything," she said. So Claire did. She told her about the attack, about the order to stand down, about Halford's dismissiveness and arrogance, about the choice she'd made and the lives she'd saved, and she told her about what happened afterward. About the investigation, about the medal and the transfer, about the way the military was trying to bury her. Sarah listened without interrupting, her expression growing darker with every sentence. When Claire finished, Sarah sat back and let out a long breath. "This is big," she said quietly. "Bigger than you know. If I publish this, it's going to blow up. There'll be hearings, investigations, people are going to lose their careers." "Good," Claire said. Sarah looked at her carefully. "You understand that includes you, right? They're going to come after you, hard. They'll say you're bitter, that you're lying, that you're trying to get revenge on Halford. They'll dig into your past. They'll look for anything they can use against you." Claire met her eyes. "Let them try." Sarah smiled. "All right then," she said. "Let's burn it all down." The article dropped 5 days later. The headline read, "Marine sniper saved hundreds of lives. Then the military tried to silence her. It went viral within hours." Cable news picked it up. Social media exploded. Veterans groups started weighing in. Senators demanded answers. And Claire's phone started ringing. The first call was from Major Reeves. He sounded tired. "You should have told me," he said. "Would you have tried to stop me?" A long pause. "Yeah, probably. That's why I didn't tell you." Another pause. "For what it's worth, Claire, I think you did the right thing. Both times." The second call was from her lawyer, a JAG officer assigned to represent her. "They're going to crucify you for this," he said bluntly. "Going to the press without authorization is a violation of about 15 different regulations. They can charge you. They can strip your benefits. They can—" "I know," Claire said. "I don't care." The third call was from a number she didn't recognize. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. "Staff Sergeant Donovan?" The voice was unfamiliar, female, calm. "Yes? My name is Congresswoman Janet Torres. I sit on the House Armed Services Committee. I just finished reading the article about you." Claire's heart started pounding. "I'd like you to come testify before Congress," Torres said. "I think it's time we had a very public conversation about how the military treats soldiers who do the right thing." Claire closed her eyes. "I'll be there," she said. The hearing room was packed. Claire sat at a long table facing the congressional panel, a microphone positioned in front of her. Behind her, every seat was filled with reporters, veterans advocates, military family members, and civilians who'd followed her story. Camera flashes popped. Journalists whispered into phones. The air hummed with tension. Claire wore her dress uniform. The Navy Cross hung on her chest. They'd given it to her in a private ceremony 2 weeks earlier, trying to control the narrative. But the story was already out. The damage was already done, or the truth was already told, depending on how you looked at it. Congresswoman Janet Torres sat at the center of the panel, flanked by 4 other representatives. She leaned into her microphone. "Staff Sergeant Donovan, thank you for being here today. I know this hasn't been easy." Claire nodded. "Thank you for having me, ma'am." "Let's get right to it," Torres said. "On the evening of August 14th, you were on perimeter duty at Fort Liberty when you observed suspicious vehicles approaching the base. Is that correct?" "Yes, ma'am." "And you reported this to your commanding officer, Lieutenant Marcus Halford?" "I did." What was his response? Claire kept her voice steady. "He told me to stand down. He said I was seeing problems that weren't there. He ordered me not to engage. But you engaged anyway." "Yes, ma'am." "Why?" Claire took a breath. "Because I saw 6 armed men in tactical gear placing explosives at a base entrance. Because I knew that if they breached that gate, they would have access to barracks housing over 300 Marines. Because every instinct I'd developed over 8 years of combat told me that people were about to die. Her voice didn't waver. And because I took an oath to protect this country and the people in it, not to follow orders blindly, not to ignore threats because someone with more rank told me to, but to use my training and my judgment to do what was right. The room was silent. Torres nodded slowly. And what happened after you took those shots? I neutralized 5 hostile targets and disabled the 6th. The quick reaction force arrived and secured the scene. The surviving attacker was taken into custody. We recovered enough explosives to level half the base. And yet, Torres said, her voice sharpening, you were placed under investigation. You were threatened with court-martial. You were told your career was over. Why? Claire glanced at the row of military brass sitting to her left. 2 generals, 3 colonels, all stone-faced. Lieutenant Halford sat among them, looking pale. Because I disobeyed an order, Claire said simply. An order that would have gotten people killed. Yes, ma'am. Torres leaned forward. Staff Sergeant, do you believe you were investigated because you disobeyed an order? Or because you're a woman who made a male superior officer look incompetent? The room erupted. Half the audience started applauding. Reporters shouted questions. The panel members started talking over each other. The chairman banged his gavel. Order! We will have order! When the noise died down, Claire spoke quietly into the microphone. I believe I was investigated because the system doesn't know what to do with people who break the rules, even when breaking the rules is the only moral choice. I believe I was investigated because admitting I was right means admitting that the chain of command failed. And I believe the military would rather bury one staff sergeant than admit that failure publicly. She paused. But yes, ma'am. I also believe that being a woman made it easier for them to try. The questioning went on for 3 hours. They asked about her training, her record, her relationship with Halford, the intelligence gathered from the captured attacker, the explosives, the casualty estimates, and then they called Lieutenant Halford to testify. He approached the table stiffly, not looking at Claire. Congresswoman Torres didn't waste time. Lieutenant Halford, you gave Staff Sergeant Donovan a direct order to stand down. Why? Halford cleared his throat. At the time, I didn't have confirmation of a credible threat. I saw civilian vehicles on a public road. I believed Staff Sergeant Donovan was overreacting. Based on what evidence? Based on my assessment of the situation. You were watching the same perimeter she was? No, ma'am. I was in the command center. So you didn't have eyes on the vehicles? No, ma'am. But Staff Sergeant Donovan did. Yes, ma'am. And she reported armed hostiles with explosives. She reported suspicious vehicles. She didn't confirm. Lieutenant, she told you there were armed men. She told you they were at the gate. She requested backup, and you told her she was seeing things that weren't there. Is that accurate? Halford's jaw tightened. I made a judgment call based on the information I had. The information you had was coming from an 8-year combat veteran with 43 confirmed kills and a spotless record, and you ignored it. Why? Silence. Lieutenant Halford, I'll ask you again. Why did you ignore a credible threat report from a qualified sniper? Halford looked at the table. I don't know, ma'am. You don't know. Or you don't want to say? More silence. Torres leaned back. Let me read you something, Lieutenant. This is from an email you sent to another officer 3 weeks before the attack. Quote, Donovan's been complaining again about not getting field assignments. Honestly, I'm tired of dealing with her. Women always think they're being discriminated against when really they just can't handle the pressure. I'm keeping her on tower duty where she can't do any damage. End quote. The room exploded again. Halford's face went white. Does that sound like a judgment call based on threat assessment, Lieutenant? Or does that sound like bias? Halford said nothing. You're dismissed, Torres said coldly. After the hearing, Claire stood outside the Capitol building alone for the first time in hours. The sun was setting. The air was cool. She felt exhausted and wired at the same time. Her phone buzzed. It was a text from Major Reeves. You did good in there. Proud of you. Then another one from Sarah Chen, the reporter. You're trending #1 on Twitter. The hashtag is YourStandWithClaire. Check it out. Claire opened Twitter, thousands of messages. Tens of thousands. People sharing her story. Veterans posting their own experiences with discrimination and retaliation. Civilian supporters demanding reform. She scrolled through them, her eyes stinging. Then her phone rang. Unknown number again. She answered. Staff Sergeant Donovan. This is General Patricia Osgood, Commandant of the Marine Corps. Claire's breath stopped. Ma'am, I watched your testimony today. All of it. Claire waited. What happened to you was wrong, the general said quietly. The way you were treated was wrong. The investigation was wrong. The attempt to bury you was wrong. And on behalf of the Marine Corps, I apologize. Claire didn't know what to say. Effective immediately, Osgood continued. You're being reassigned to Marine Corps Scout Sniper School as a senior instructor. You'll train the next generation of snipers. You'll have full authority over curriculum development, and you'll report directly to me. Claire's heart pounded. Additionally, Lieutenant Halford has been relieved of duty and will face a board of inquiry for dereliction of duty and conduct unbecoming. Several other officers who were involved in the decision to investigate you are also under review. Osgood paused. You were right to take that shot, Staff Sergeant, and you were right to tell your story. We need more Marines like you, not fewer. Claire's voice was thick when she finally spoke. Thank you, ma'am. Don't thank me. You earned this. Now go do the job. The line went dead. Claire stood there, phone in hand, staring at the darkening sky. 6 months later, Claire stood in front of a class of 24 Marine sniper candidates. Half of them were women. All of them looked at her with a mixture of awe and nervousness. She set her rifle down on the table and looked at them. My name is Staff Sergeant Claire Donovan, she said, and I'm going to teach you how to save lives. She paused. But before we talk about shooting, we're going to talk about something more important. We're going to talk about trust, about instinct, about the moment when everything you've trained for comes down to a single decision. She walked along the front of the classroom. Some of you are going to face situations where the rules don't make sense, where the orders you're given don't match what you're seeing, where doing the right thing means risking everything. She stopped and looked at them. And when that moment comes, you're going to have to decide what kind of Marine you want to be, the kind who follows orders blindly, or the kind who has the courage to do what's right even when it costs you. One of the female candidates raised her hand. Ma'am, how do you know which choice is right? Claire smiled. You trust your training. You trust your instincts. And you trust yourself. She picked up her rifle. Now let's get to work. That evening, Claire sat in her office, reviewing training schedules. There was a knock at the door. Come in. Sarah Chen stepped inside, holding a notebook. Got time for a follow-up interview? She asked with a smile. Claire laughed, always. Sarah sat down. So how does it feel? Being the most famous Marine in America? Claire shook her head. I'm not famous. I just did my job. You did more than that. You changed the conversation. Do you know how many women have enlisted in the past 6 months? How many discrimination complaints have been filed and actually investigated? How many officers have been removed for bias? Claire looked down at her hands.